Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. In this video, a homeowner association sued my family because my child rode an electric bicycle in the HOA neighborhood. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one starts like this. When my son turned 16, my parents bought him one of those electric bicycles. I was a little unsure at first, but after doing my own research, I saw that it was a really good product. My son is a good kid and has always been safe, so I didn't worry about him doing anything dangerous on it. He loved it and the fact it was a faster way for him to get around the neighborhood and visit his friends and get to school. He even helped me out a lot by being able to go to the store and pick up a few items when I was in a pinch. I don't want to say that I am some amazing parent and created a perfect child. He still acts like a teenager, he just has a good head on his shoulders. Now, we live within an HOA and in the past I've had several occasions of them giving me crap for things that they shouldn't be. One was that we had a delivery sitting out on our porch, apparently for too long. I didn't know that I was getting a package since it was a gift and we were away for the weekend, so it did sit out for a couple of days, but on my own porch, not bothering anybody. Another time we had a bad storm and one of our trees lost a huge branch. It was too big for us to handle and had to get a company to cut it up and remove it. They were busy after the storm with requests and the HOA fined us for not getting it done fast enough. I bring them up because after my son got the bike, the HOA president, Mr. Jones, decided to start a fight about my son having the electric bicycle. We got a letter in the mail from him saying that our son couldn't ride it anymore because it was deemed a safety hazard, that it was too dangerous and he was gonna hurt himself and others with it. I spoke to him and told him that there was no hazard involved, he rode it carefully and wore a helmet and everything. It was the same as if he was riding a regular bike, but this guy did not want to listen. Mr. Jones, that thing is dangerous. I don't care how safe you think he is. At any moment he can decide to go crazy and somebody will get hurt. Me, is there anything in the bylaws that state no electric bicycles? Mr. Jones, not specifically, but there are several other things about endangerment. Me, come back when you have an actual valid reason in the bylaws why an electric bike cannot be allowed. And by the way, Ripe Stars, this is so ridiculous. How would an electric bicycle even be dangerous? Isn't a normal car already more dangerous than any bicycle? Unless this idiot of an HOA president actually believes that the electric bicycle just explodes randomly or something. Anyway, until then he's going to keep on using it. Well, he did go through his bylaws and find something stupid to use against us. An old and outdated rule regarding motorized vehicles. It was basic stuff about them needing valid registration and other stuff that clearly applied to cars. Since back then those were the only motorized vehicles and my guess was to stop homemade things from going on the roads. I was angry about this and decided to take the violation notice and speak to Mr. Jones and the rest of the HOA board in person. I wanted to argue that the bike did not fall under any of these things and hoped that at least one person might see sense in what I was saying. I explained that it was actually a good thing because unlike a 16-year-old driving a car, it was safer and more friendly towards the environment. That he had always rode it safely and the outdated rule clearly does not take the modern inventions into account. Plus that it was a low speed and just because it was motorized did not mean that he could go crazy fast on it or anything. Mr. Jones was set on not wanting it to be allowed and everybody else was backing him up despite some of their faces seeming unsure. His final comment to me really made me think that he didn't understand it at all and just wanted to have it banned because it was new and scary to him. Mr. Jones, aside from all of this, the boy does not even have a license. It's a matter of time before police pull him over and arrest him, so you should care about your son and stop him from riding the bike. I did not hide from my son what was going on and told him that he could do whatever he wanted. He decided that he wanted to keep using the bike, which I was proud of. I would fight for him against the HOA no matter what they decided to try and do. I was fighting back against their fines and would not be giving them money or taking the bike away. But well, they took me to court claiming that I was violating HOA regulations. I got a lawyer that did all kinds of HOA work and knew exactly how to take apart the bylaws in order to prove the HOA wrong. He had their frivolous lawsuit thrown out as the judge agreed that the bike did not constitute a motorized vehicle, with the judge warning them not to file frivolous lawsuits out of spite or due to having some vendetta against people. I think this was not their first time in this situation based on those comments. I was not done with them though and knew that something else must be going on with them. I got a different lawyer to dig into the HOA and see anything fishy was going on with them. Well, it turns out that old Mr. Jones had been mismanaging HOA funds and using them for his personal gain and other HOA board members. They were seen using the money to throw themselves lavish parties and label them as board meetings. Also, some odd checks to landscaping companies that didn't seem to have ever existed. Bank statements that seemed odd and didn't really add up right. I reported them so an actual police investigation could be conducted because it was clear I was looking at fraud and needed to bring this up to actual authority. Well, they got dug into and ended up back in a courtroom, just not on the side anybody wants to be on. They were getting charged with fraud and they don't have much to say as a defense, let me tell you. All the proof is in front of them, and taking a plea deal is the only smart decision any of them can do. With this HOA board basically all arrested for embezzlement, we had to get a new one in, and I was worried about that. I did not want another group of power-hungry people that wanted to start fights about everything. I was glad to find out that these people actually seemed normal, and when the idea of bringing some old bylaws up to date was mentioned, they agreed. Now, the HOA rules do have things to say about e-bikes, but all of them seem fair. They want people riding them to give the right of way for pedestrians and not be on their phone when riding, wear protective gear, etc. Rules that show that they care about the actual people and not just finding reasons to make fines and get themselves some quick and easy money. Or at least I can hope that things stay like that and being on the board doesn't go to their heads. For that only time will tell, but I think for now my family is out of the HOA radar and can try to relax. And by the way, Ripe Star, speaking about electric bicycles, there is a guy I can really recommend to you on YouTube. He is called Kino, K-I-N-O, Yves, Y-V-E-S, and he rode his electric bicycle, which is kind of a special bike. It's not just electric, but he also can lay down on it, starting from France, through Europe, through the Middle East, and now to Africa. And I think his goal is South Africa. Absolutely incredible channel, not daily videos, but I think at least one video per week. And let me tell you, I cannot miss a single one of his videos. Such a nice guy. Anyway, the next one will be stories from Ask Reddit that I'm pretty sure you have never heard before. The thread was titled, Police Officers of Reddit, what is your best, I think we have the wrong person, story. Story 1. I've got two from 25 years ago when I was a cop, on one side of the badge and one from the other. So the first, I got assigned a warrant service to pick up a wanted felon. Mr. Robertson was 6 foot tall, 250 pounds, long red hair, bushy red beard, and lived at, let's say, 123 Elm Street. Pretty distinctive dude. So I roll up to 123 Elm Street and sure enough, there mowing his lawn in the front yard is the man himself. 6 foot, 250 pounds, red hair, red beard. I make contact with him and say, hey, Mr. Robertson, you got warrants and it's time to go to jail. Hook him up, take him to jail, and in central booking, I get his property off him, and while filling out the inventory, happen to notice that this guy is Mr. Robinson, not Robertson. Sure enough, the wanted guy was my guy's landlord and his twin brother from another mother doppelganger. When I'd said Robertson, Robinson didn't even twig to the fact that I hadn't said his name, he just heard the similar sounding name as his own. We had to walk the whole thing back and reactivate the warrant and then kicked him loose with a handshake and an apology. The one from the other side, I'd just gotten off duty at 2 AM and was driving home still in uniform. There wasn't any other traffic on the road, so I was not really surprised when a police car turned in behind me and started following me. I figured he was trolling for drunks and I was the only thing moving on the road, so he was just gonna follow me a little to observe my driving and he would realize pretty quick that I was sober and peel off. Well, instead another patrol car joined him and another, then all four lit me up and spread out behind me, blocking the road in a full felony stop. Well, this just got interesting. They went through the whole procedure and I carefully followed their instructions. When they finally got me out and saw my uniform, they just stopped for a few seconds while I was trying to figure out just what the hell was going on. Then 3 of the officers got in their cars, turned off their lights and took off, while the original officer told me I could put my hands down and explain what was going on. My car was a spot-on match for the suspect vehicle in an armed robbery and shooting that had just occurred right up the road. I would have driven right by the scene before the cops even got there a few minutes before the officer in the next district spotted me and thought I was the subject. It was an interesting night. And the next one is another story from Ask Reddit. I'm not a cop, but the wrong person in question. There's another man 2 years younger than me who shares my first and last name, exact same spelling. The only difference is the middle name. Police were investigating a county trustee who was giving people housing assistance checks they didn't qualify for. They would cash the assistance and give the trustee a percentage back. One of the civilians being investigated was the other guy. A plainclothes cop in an unmarked car shows up with a female holding a clipboard, identifies himself as a state trooper, and within 5 minutes is asking me for copies of my bank records. He is threatening to subpoena if I don't comply. This is not the first time I've been mistaken for him. I used to get his mail all the time, and I even asked if they were looking for me or the other guy, pointing out our different middle names. I got really suspicious really fast, a high-pressure situation demanding access to my financial records, threats of subpoenas and further legal action, so I started to doubt this was an actual police officer and was in fact just a scammer. The badge he showed me was just a plastic square like my driver's license, further muddying the issue. I told him I wanted to speak with the police and called dispatch. 2 uniformed officers showed up 50 minutes later and confirmed the guy was an officer. The woman with him was some kind of auditor and records keeper. After a further 15 minutes of questions, the woman pulled the guy away and pointed out something on her phone. And yep, they wanted the other guy. And the next one is also from Ask Reddit. So I live in a small town in rural England and we used to get some trainees/new police officers from the Met there for their training. Me and some of my friends were teenagers and we were walking to the supermarket because what else is there to do in a small town pre-internet? Suddenly, from out of nowhere, this police car comes screaming out of nowhere, sirens going, and screeches to a halt in front of us. A young guy, must have only been about 5 years or so older than us, jumps out and starts giving us the whole hairdryer treatment. He lines us up and starts taking our statements of what we had been up to in the last hour, gloating at us and saying, "You lads are in trouble now, criminal damage, trespass and theft. You have really screwed up." With him was the local Bobby, and he came up to each of us in turn after the younger guy had grilled us and said very jovially, "No, don't worry lads, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. We've had some reports of a break-in. And well, you don't match the preliminary description and I'm sure we will get this cleared up when we get the more detailed description come through." And by the way, what is a local Bobby? Maybe our lovely British friends in the comments can explain. Anyway, so the more detailed description comes through the radio and the young guy is wearing the biggest crap-eating grin you had ever seen. The description did not even remotely match and honestly, the young guy looked so disappointed, we all ended up feeling sorry for him. So yeah, that was probably quite embarrassing for him. And the next one is another story from r/Ask Reddit. I am not a cop, but my mom had a story for this happen to her. Basically, it revolves around the show America's Most Wanted. A woman who looked almost exactly like my mom was featured on the show. She had the same hair, same face, at the kicker, same name. They even showed my mom's actual information, which I won't list here, as being the criminals. The story ended like every story on that show does. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of this dangerous criminal, please call this number. Now onto my mom's perspective. She was just sitting at home on a Saturday night alone. As she lived alone, she was reading a Stephen King book when she hears some commotion coming from the hallway. She ignores it, lots of yelling. She had not seen the show, which painted her as a criminal, and then suddenly, bam, her door is knocked down in an instant. About 10 cops flood into her one-bedroom apartment and she is arrested. She explained that they had the wrong person. They claimed everything matched, social security matched. DNA also matched, name matched, photo resemblance matched. It turns out the woman was basically stealing my mom's identity and intentionally making herself look like my mom. The end result is, when they created a profile for the criminal, they used my mom's information to start with. So, when they arrested my mom, of course the information matched. It was her information originally. They kept her in jail for 2 weeks. It was not until they took fingerprints from the scene of a crime they said she committed and the prints did not match. Then they realized that she was not the criminal. It's scary to think if they had used her profile prints rather than crime scene prints as the set to compare to, that she would have been still in jail today. It was basically a life sentence. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, these cops sound highly incompetent. That is absolutely terrifying. Either way, the next one is another Ask Reddit story, and please let me know in the comments what you think about these kind of short stories. I have to say, I kind of like them because there is a higher chance that you have never seen them in a YouTube video. Obligatory, not a cop. A few years ago, my husband and I were having a lazy Sunday morning, making pancakes, blasting music, having a good time. And then there's a really loud banging on the door and I rush over to answer it, thinking someone must have knocked a couple times before we heard it, and open it up to 4 police officers who push into our kitchen. 2 of them grab my husband and start telling him that he is being placed under arrest for a hit-and-run accident that took place in a city almost 2 hours away. Freaking out, my husband explains to the police that he was at work all night and just got home about an hour before that. He must have been really convincing because 2 officers sat at our kitchen table with us while the other 2 went outside to call my husband's workplace to confirm his story. Turns out, a car that we had sold about a year before that was involved in an accident that hit 3 parked cars. And a woman the night prior. Woman had minor injuries thankfully, but the driver was nowhere to be found. There was a clear video of our old car smashing into parked cars, hitting pedestrians, and a man jumping out of it shortly afterwards. When the police found the abandoned car and ran the VIN, it led them to our house. In Ontario, when you sell a vehicle, you're supposed to bring a slip into the Service Ontario Centre to prove that the ownership has transferred, but it's not really enforced. And there's no penalties for not doing it, because the person purchasing the vehicle needs to do the same to get plates, stickers, insurance, etc. Obviously and stupidly, we did not do this. The cops came back in, apologized for the mistake, gave us a half-hearted lecture about properly switching ownerships, and then left. The dick that was actually driving the car was caught the next day. An officer called my husband to tell him and made a joke about us having to pay any impound fees. The next one is titled One-Party Consent Recordings, the Kryptonite of A-hole Supervisors. I am a paramedic, and after many years of working regular ground ambulance, I decided I had enough. My whole career I was either a glorified Uber driver, being spit on by drunks, bit by meth heads, or chauffeuring people between hospitals. Though, once in a blue moon, I saved a life. There's not a lot of different jobs you can parlay an EMS career into, so I elected to move into the private sector and got a job doing basically the same thing at a mine in a remote environment, worked 2 weeks straight with 2 weeks off, less stress and an enviable salary. On the surface, this was a sweet gig, almost heaven compared to the regular stretcher jockey job I came from, and it would have been such if not for the absolute psychopath who managed the EMS services out there. I did not work directly from the mine's operator, instead I was employed by a contractor. The coordinator, my local boss as he was called, was a golden boy as far as the mine corporation was concerned. There was not an ass he didn't kiss or a bigwig he wouldn't suck up to, and I admit he could be charming, quite adept at impersonating a human being actually. It wasn't long before I discovered he reserved decency for everyone but his subordinates. His behavior started out as petty micromanaging, which was irritating, but then progressed to insults, put-downs, name-calling, "Hey dumbass," was his usual way to get my attention, and outright hostility. The man clearly enjoyed being a small-time workplace despot and knew he could get away with it because of his reputation with our paymasters. It was around the 2 months mark before I really warmed up to my co-workers. There were 8 of us, including myself and the dipshit in chief, and not a single one of them spoke a nice word about him. Most were resigned to him acting like a massive cow because the 2-week holiday every month along with the pay rate. They also told me every complaint only fell on deaf ears, provoked retaliation, and again, his relationship with the client made him nigh untouchable. This is when I started recording everything and did so with these 2 assumptions. Number 1, the company would only act with serious proof of malfeasance. Number 2, his acts of bastardery would only escalate. Neither assumption proved false. I had nearly 3 months of audio tapes of him being just his regular butthole self before he went too far. About a week into the shift I showed up to our station and was called into his office only to be informed that I was being let go and my replacement would be there in a few hours. I was to go back to our accommodations, pack my stuff and report back there. Well damn, I thought before doing as I was bidden. Upon arriving back to the office with my suitcases, this sadist started laughing and said, "No one is coming to replace you, you're so damn gullible." It was a total mock firing. I was livid and let loose on him, finally ending a tirade with a malicious hint. Can you imagine what the office would do if they could have heard all this BS? Unrepentant to the last, he coldly stared at me before replying, "Can you imagine what they would do if a bunch of empty beer cans turned up and I told the office I saw you drinking?" Having recorded all this and knowing my glorious victory was assured, I feigned capitulation to carry on with my day. My first day off, I sent in a detailed letter to the company along with recordings, and as expected, they fired his ass. What came after was righteous cackling laughter for hours. I wonder, is this how Napoleon felt after winning at Austerlitz? And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.